Hello, my name is Jeff Stockwell. I work for Hunter Engineering. Today I'm going to review the operation of the TCX 575. First, before we start to do a dismount, we want to assess what we're working with. On first appearance, when we look at this wheel, we see that there's no lip. It's hard to judge the depth. I've taken the liberty to dismount this wheel ahead of time. As you can see, we have the barrel coming up, and then we have the drop center, and then we have the lip here. This is the point of dismount. We want to go for the least amount of distance to remove the top bead from the tire. When we look at the back side of the wheel, we can see what I was speaking of earlier. We have depth here, and then the barrel comes up into the drop center area. So if it's hard to identify, turn the wheel around, and again, look for the closest distance between the lip to the drop center. Also, before we start to dismount, we want to assess if the wheel has TPMS. Since 2007, every vehicle sold in the United States has a TPMS sensor. On this particular one, we can see here, there is no sensor. If we look, this is what a sensor would look like, and it would rest right in the drop center. This is of importance because when we dismount the tire, the bead is being tucked into the drop center, which will come in contact with the sensor and break it most likely. So before dismount, we can assess if it has TPMS by looking at the valve stem. We can see here a regular stem with a mount of brass, and then this stem here, which has a TPMS sensor. Notice there's more brass on this jacket. It's also important to note that there's more than one kind of TPMS sensor. This style here that is attached to the rubber stem, we also have a style of TPMS sensor that mounts by a nut that screws down in here, and the box drops out when the nut is removed. This is important to note because with this copper core, that can go into the copper valve stem. The other style that mounts together is made of aluminum. They use a nickel core. We can mix nickel and copper, but we cannot put copper with nickel. It'll oxidize and ruin the stem. So now let's take off the tire. First, we have to loosen the tire from the wheel. Keep in mind the TPMS sensor and treat it as such that every wheel you work on has a TPMS sensor. I like to bring it to the very top and put it right where my hand is so I recognize where it is. I roll the tire into the pad and I take the shovel and I line the shovel and I come in and I break down the bead. I just loosen the top bead enough just to get that right there. That's all that's needed for this first step. In the second step, I've now turned the wheel over and have the backside against the shovel and the pad. I again have the TPMS sensor on my hand in the 12 o'clock position. I bring in the shovel, line it up so, and now I'm going to break it down. I only bring it in just enough to loosen the bead. I do not collapse the shovel all the way against the pad because I want to keep in mind that sensor is here and I do not want to come in contact with it. As I get a little bit of the tire loosened from the wheel, I bring it out and I spin it towards me, keeping the TPMS out of harm's way, and again, bringing in the shovel to loosen the bead. I will continue this until the bead is completely loose from the wheel. Once I see that so, I am done with this, and now I'm ready to take it to the tabletop. The tabletop has 4 hooks or clamps. They're able to extract and contract like so. In most applications, I will throw the wheel on top with the outer diameter of the wheel here and expand the hooks out to the wheel. So before I throw the wheel and tire assembly up onto the tabletop, let's take a look at operation. The first pedal moves the tower. The second pedal expands and contracts the tabletop, the clamps. The last pedal does rotation. As I made mention below, we have the hooks and the clamps. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to expand and contract with that lower pedal that I showed earlier. 90% of the ones you're going to dismount from the hooks being on the inside and expand out to the wheel, which will sit out on the table. So now I've thrown the wheel and tire assembly on top of the tabletop, resting like so. I kind of center it and I expand the hooks. Once that's done, I have a good bite on the wheel. It's not going anywhere. I'm going to continue by taking off the tire, the top bead off the wheel. Before I start, I'm going to check the tower and make sure that it is loose. When I pull this lever back, you see it contracts to the top position And if also, I can push it back just to make sure I clear the wheel once I bring it around. Hitting the pedal I showed earlier, I bring the tire in position. Now I'm going to rotate it. Again with the pedal I showed earlier. Bring my hand up top, and my other hand grabbing the handle, pulling it towards me and bringing it down in position. Go ahead and bring the duck head in contact with the wheel. There are plastic protectors there. You will not scratch the wheel. Make it sure it's secure. Once it is, I push the yellow button with my thumb, and the duck head auto indents back into position, again securing that the wheel will not be scratched during dismount. Now that the head's in set, we're going to dismount the tire off the wheel. First, I start with rotation with the pedal I showed earlier. Once I start rotating, I'm going to grab the top arm and swing it over in position. If need be, there is a toggle. I can lift it up to clear the wheel and tire assembly. Once it's over in position, it is locked in position. There is no fear of striking the tower, and again, it won't swing out on you because it is locked. I'm going to look for the gap that I made earlier, bring down, and set my disc just shy of touching the wheel. Once it's set, I'm going to drop it further, actually collapsing the bead, and again starting the rotation. There's a stopper that will not allow the arm to swing around. It'll stay in this position. I will grab some lube. Once I have the mounting paste, I'll actually apply it to the top bead. This will help dismount the tire off the wheel. Now that that's done, I'm going to remove the upper swing arm by simply toggling it up, indenting the yellow tab, and sliding the arm out of the way. So once I've finished, I'm now going to take the toggle and lift the arm up to clear the wheel and the sidewall of the tire by simply pushing the toggle switch and then sliding the arm out of position. So now that I've broken the bead down, I've lubricated the top bead, it's time to take the tire off the wheel. We start by putting the table into motion. Hitting the pedal I showed earlier, rotate the table at full speed. You're looking for the lowest gap here in the tire to set the hook. I move my hand to the toggle switch we saw earlier. And at the point that's given, I'm going to insert the hook into the bead. We can see now that the hook is actually set into the bead and has a hold of it. It will not come in contact with your TPMS. There is no fear of striking the TPMS. I can go around continually, again, not harming TPMS. I stop where the TPMS is resting by or under the duck head. I'm going to now lift up this leverless hook to bring the bead up and over the wheel. Now by simply lifting the toggle, we can see that the bead has been pulled up and over by the hook. I'm now going to take the red spatula, apply it between the bead and the wheel to secure the tire up over the wheel during disassembly. Creating a small gap to make the insertion easier, I now just simply hold down on the spatula and again hit the pedal to rotate the table. We can see the TPMS ends up again under the duck head for the next part of the procedure. So now that I've taken the top bead off the wheel, it's time to take the lower bead off the wheel. I do so by grabbing the tire and picking it up, and then I pull it towards me to bring it into the drop center. You can see as I drop it down, it slides down the barrel I showed you earlier. So again, pull up and in towards you to get it into that drop center. I'm going to take my waist, push it against the tire, now it is holding itself in position, take my left hand, grab the tire, and bring it up over. I do this so when I insert the hook will clear the top bead. Here we go. Once the hook drops in, you'll actually feel it push against the lower bead, pick it up and set it back on, and now I toggle it back up, and the leverless hook has grabbed the lower bead. From here, I'm going to grab my red spatula, like I did earlier, and insert between the lower bead and the top of the wheel. Once I have this in position, I'm going to insert my hook into the bead and the wheel, keeping the tire up over the wheel. Now I'm going to rotate the table and remove the tire completely off the wheel. Grab the tire, pull back just a little bit, and slide it towards the exit for the tower. Hit the pedal, as I showed earlier, to remove the tower. Now the tire has been removed off the wheel. Let's take a look at some of the things that we were paying attention to earlier. I'm going to rotate the table and show you the TPMS sensor. Notice it's still intact. There is no fracture on the housing. And again, the reason why is because we dismounted it with the TPMS sensor in relation to the duck head. Now that the wheel and tire are apart, let's bring them back together. So during the lubrication, I'm going to set the tire on the machine, not on the wheel. We do not want to cause damage to the customer's wheel. So we keep the tire on the machine or on the floor. I apply the paste on the bead. Again, this is to help with the mounting. If you do not apply paste on this part, you can come in risk of tearing the bead of the tire. A torn bead can cause the tire to explode off the wheel. Now that I've lubricated the bead, I'm going to bring the tower back in. Again, by hitting the pedal, shown earlier, to swing the tower in position. Notice that the tower came exactly back where I had set it earlier because I did not hit the toggle. There is no reason to hit the toggle once you swing the tower out. It's been set for this wheel diameter and wheel width. So now that the tire is in position and the tower and the duck head are in position, I'm going to bring the lower bead up against the duck head by setting the lower bead on top of the duck head, coming over and then under the clip. Now that the tower and the duck head are in position, we're going to take the lower bead and put it on the wheel. We're going to rest the lower bead on the high side, dropping it to the low side under this hook. So now that I've taken the tire and set it over and under, I have my TPMS out of position. What I mean by out of position is this part of the bead is going to tuck into that drop center I showed earlier. By staying ahead of that, the TPMS sensor, the little box, will not be touched or broken by the lower bead. So now we're going to go into motion. I end up in the same position I was earlier with over, under, and my TPMS out of position where the bead will now go on and not come in contact. Now I grab my upper swing arm again and bring it in position by sliding it over. If it comes in contact, lifting it out of contact and pushing it completely into position, again securing it or locking it like so. Now I take and swing the arm around, setting the disc behind my TPMS sensor. That way, as the bead is pushed down at this position, everything behind it will be pushed in as well. Everything in front of it will be up, keeping the TPMS box out of harm's way. So now let's put the bead on. Again, over, under, like so. This is in position. I drop it down, actually compressing the sidewall, pushing the bead into the drop center. Now I rotate the table, applying a little bit of pressure here, just enough to keep it in motion. I want you to see what took place during that procedure. So I'm going to lift the upper arm up more. And now I'm going to swing this arm out so we can see. Pay attention to this piston here. Notice how it drops down. So when this swings from the table turning, it will actually cam up, relieving pressure on the bead, allowing it to drop into the drop center automatically. That doesn't substitute you paying attention. If there's a lot of stress, and you can hear the stress and see the stress, take the time and lift it up manually as it goes around and cams up by itself as well. Now that we've done so, we're going to press the toggle switch and again slide it out of position. Coming back to the tower, hitting the pedal below, taking the tower out of position. Now I have access to my stem. I'm going to inflate the tire by applying to the stem. The core is out right now. I recommend leaving the core out during the first initial inflation, it makes the process faster. The inflation pedal is on the left-hand side over here. I simply press it, and the tire will inflate like so. Stop inflation to see where your tire pressure is currently set. Once I apply the pedal, the needle does not move. Once the pedal is released, the gauge shows where the tire pressure is currently set. Go ahead and depress the pedal again to apply air. Notice the needle does not move, but once I let off, the new air pressure is set and shown. Continue so until you reach the desired air pressure for the tire and wheel assembly that you're working on. So we've reviewed how to take the tire off the wheel and put the tire back on the wheel. I'd like to show you a simple trick on how to take the tire off the wheel when the leverless hook is difficult to insert. So let's go to that part. So now, here we are. I'm going to take the tower now and actually swing it out of position, taking it out of the picture entirely. Once the tower is out of position, I'm going to bring the lower arm into position. I'm going to rotate the table to this half moon to where the disc can come in towards the wheel. Once in position, I simply lift the tire up, clearing it, and my TPMS sensor is right here under my hand. Dropping it and bringing the disc again in contact with the wheel. I've rotated my TPMS sensor in position. It's under my hand right now. I lift the tire up and push it over, putting it into the drop center. Now I bring my disc into position by dropping it, bringing it in and kissing the outer lip of the wheel like so, and locking it. Now I'm going to switch my hands by putting my left hand on the toggle and my right hand grabbing the tire and picking it up and putting this side into the drop center with my right hand. I lift up and create a little bit of a gap between the lower bead and the wheel. I place my left hand on the handle, release with my right hand, and pull in, applying the disc up and over the wheel. From this angle, we can see the TPMS sensor is safe. The disc is inserted over the wheel between the tire. I can take and give it a little bit more lift, taking the disc off the wheel, and now by rotating, the tire comes off. Now that the tire is off the wheel, simply unlock the arm, swing it out of position, and it's ready to be put back on. Now that we've practiced, let's take a look at the end result. like so. So in conclusion, we always want to pay attention to first, the TPMS, does it have it or not? Second, the drop center. And of course, during disassembly, the violence and motion. The machine will do whatever you tell it to do. Please pay attention to it the entire time.